G'day and welcome to Media Tech Talk. I'm Paul Luckett.
And I'm David Richards. In today's digital media landscape, where distribution models are shifting and technology is being reshaped in real time, the companies that survive and learn to thrive will be those that adapt with strategies built for what's coming next. Today's guest has spent his career at the edge of digital innovation, from starting out as a software engineer at IBM to venture capitalist to serving as COO of Grooveshark, the music streaming pioneer that once rivaled Spotify, and was even an investor in Napster. Dan Ruhr has seen what happens when industries are disrupted and what it takes to survive on the other side.
Today, Dan is the CEO of Admiral, the visitor relationship management company, helping thousands of publishers such as News Corp, Paramount CBS, NBC Universal, Gannett, Weather.com, and more move from commercial strategies built on anonymous traffic to strategies centered on known, engaged audiences and long-term value exchange. Admiral has become a leader in AI-powered, privacy-first engagement, subscriptions, video, visitor journeys, and ad blocker recovery, helping publishers future-proof their revenue in a rapidly changing media landscape. So here's the question. In a world where platforms increasingly control distribution and artificial intelligence is reshaping discovery, what happens when publishers stop chasing scale and start building relationships? Let's find out. Dan, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Good to see you guys.
G'day, Dan.
Thanks for being here. We have our first Florida Gator on the show, so in honor of that, I wanted to make sure I came with the right merchandise today.
Oh, mate.
There you go. Nice.
What is that?
The Gator is the mascot of University of Florida.
Right.
Yeah,
we did discuss this in rehearsal, Paul.
Yes.
I can't claim to be a Gator, but I am a big fan, definitely.
Awesome.
Dan, how's things going on in Florida today?
It's going great. You mentioned the Gators. They just won their conference in basketball last year when they won the national championship. My family was able to go, so Gator basketball is near and dear to my heart. So I love seeing you wear the hat. So it's a good week for the Gators for sure.
Great, love hearing that. I'm looking forward to next football season, that's for sure.
Yes.
So Dan, you've had a really fascinating journey. I've been lucky enough to know you and call you a friend for some time now. So I know, I always enjoy our conversations and enjoy digging into kind of your history. Before we get into Admiral and everything happening in the industry right now, take us back and tell us a bit about the journey that led you to Admiral and what first drew you into media and technology space.
Sure. So, to go way back, I got to give some props to my parents and my mom, who was very early in computers. So it really started there for me. And we had like the first Apple computer on the block. And so I was programming BASIC on the Apple computer, became very enamored with the Apple startup story, went to college for computer engineering, really with designs on starting my own company. But in the process, interview with IBM, they were kind of the Google at the time, and they made an offer. And so I said, listen, I'll go learn from a big company before I go start my own. Did that. This was early internet days, kind of worked on protocol and security work. And then got involved in the startup scene in Research Triangle, North Carolina. It's a very active research park and startup scene. And noticed that UNC Chapel Hill, which was the big university in the region, was driving that scene. So I wanted to go back to school at Chapel Hill, did an MBA and a JD there. On the business side, focused on startups and venture, and on the law side, focused on new media, intellectual property. In that process, I got exposed to venture capital. And so I really lucked into meeting a Silicon Valley investor named Tim Draper, third generation VC. He's an incredible investor. And Tim wanted to launch his first East Coast venture fund, so asked if I would help do that. So we launched Draper Atlantic, investing up and down the East Coast US, all early stage software and media deals. Did about 40 deals overall across 3 funds. Part of that brought me back down to Florida. And then the last deal out of that was Grooveshark, which was mentioned in the opening, which we could dig into some more. But Grooveshark, I moved from an investor actually into management because it exploded onto the scene. It was really the pioneer of music streaming. And when we ultimately sold that company to the music labels, I grabbed the product team and spun them out to create Admiral. And we can talk further about Admiral, but that watching kind of the disruption in the music category was a big catalyst to what drove Admiral and really what's going on in the industry right now. And not only Grooveshark, I was lucky enough to put the first money into Napster, and so saw that whole progression of the digital music wars.
Dan, what's your music streaming platform of choice now?
To be honest, right now I'm using Apple. Yeah. And it's because they've done a great job with the bundling. Like we just have everything on Apple. We're with Verizon, which has this Apple bundle, etc. And so they've done a good job with the bundling for sure.
Yeah, like you hear a lot of talk around music rights and royalties with performers. Was that something that you were challenged with at the time when you were in that part of the industry?
Oh, absolutely. So we go back, if we look at Napster and Grooveshark, they were kind of the two bookends of the digital music revolution. Napster was that shift from buying CDs, and people didn't want to spend $20, $30 on a CD if they only liked one or two tracks. And so they wanted to listen to things on a track basis. And so Napster kind of, unbound the CD to tracks. And your server might have some tracks on it, and Paul's server might have some tracks on it, and the Napster software allowed y'all to swap tracks with each other. You could see the CD industry just implode almost immediately as that came into the world. And then if you fast forward a decade, then you had Grooveshark was the one who shifted from swapping of tracks to you just type in a song and you hit play and it starts streaming automatically. And so those two pieces were the bookends, and ultimately the music labels in both cases were kind of trying to put the genie back in the bottle. They didn't know what was going on, and it was really user empowerment that was going on, right? Technology was created, which opened up user empowerment, and so how should the labels of the industry embrace that? And actually, I mean, it's a sad but I think informative story of the Grooveshark story, which is ultimately the labels sued Grooveshark for billions. Actually, I think the lawsuit was a $17 billion lawsuit. It was bigger than the whole industry at the time. Yeah. And at the same time, put money into and got behind Spotify when it was just in Sweden. And so it was this small thing going on in Sweden. So that was something that industry could control, and whereas Grooveshark had just exploded onto the scene and was reaching 100 million users. And so it was this kind of 1-2 move by them to, one, you have to set up access control and like what are the rules of the road, right? What is okay with content. But two, they also embraced it in getting money behind Spotify because they saw that streaming was the future. Anyway, so there's some lessons in there as well as we move into publishers and AI and everything, that access control is a big piece of it. But you also need some solidarity. That was a big piece of it, is that the music industry had solidarity to kind of tackle this problem together. Whereas publishers have a real hard time with that. There's just so many publishers in the world that it's hard to get solidarity on things. But some good lessons there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Going off track a little bit, I know, but I see what's happening in the media industry at the moment with content publishers, where we're seeing Microsoft's content marketplace, and we've been talking about Amazon coming into the market as well. And obviously we've seen OpenAI and it's buying into News Corp's content, and announcement recently on Meta doing the same. It kind of feels that now we're seeing something similar happening in the content publishing environment as well, where it become the articles like music tracks on a CD become the commodity. Is that something you're seeing, or I'm sort of getting the concept right there?
I think there's a couple things going on. I think one is just starting with the idea of user empowerment by technology, and publishers have to figure out what is our role in this, right? You can't just say no. You have to figure out how do you play offense and defense with these sorts of disruptions. Yeah. I think that as you mentioned, the licensing of content is one of the pieces of the puzzle. I do think there's I think there's something called Spur recently announced. I think there's the really simple licensing coalitions being announced. I think to get past the one-off deals that are going to happen, whether that's a News Corp or New York Times or what have you, to a ubiquitous framework so that creators get compensated, not because they have the most lawyers, but because there's a framework. Yeah. I think we're going to have to end up working our way to some sort of solidarity around, again, standards or marketplaces or what have you.
Yeah, interesting. Coming back to, I suppose when we look back at your past experiences from Napster to Grooveshark, now at Admiral, what lessons about how the internet has evolved that have stayed with you the most?
I think the first one is just this idea that disruption is a constant. Innovation and disruption is a constant, and so the minute you want to just kind of like, can I just have a couple years of normalcy? Like,
yeah,
forget it.
Exactly. I don't think that's ever going to happen again.
It's never going to happen. And so, if you're not growing, you're dying. And so the idea is, how are you, either as a technology vendor or as a publisher and leveraging technology vendors or internal resource, how are you innovating to keep moving forward? Because the world just keeps moving at a faster and faster clip. So that's probably one of my biggest lessons, both as an investor and operator. I think the other is, and you mentioned at the opening about the importance of that relationship between the publisher and the visitor, that, there's something different going on here. This is not just a content transaction, or it doesn't need to just be a content transaction. And so if we move away from online to just real world, right? Like, relationships matter. Personal relationships between Paul and I, or Paul and Trevor, or what, like, relationships matter in life, and it's how business gets done. It's how, life is fulfilling. But online, in a lot of ways, we act as if it's just a transactional framework, and it doesn't have to be that way. And the publishers that realize it doesn't have to be that way end up separating themselves from the others. And so anyway, that was a bit of a takeaway also, just like the importance of relationships, whether it's real world or digital, that really gives kind of teeth and competitive moats to surviving into the future.
And you mentioned before around the importance of mission-driven companies. When you first stepped into the media technology space, did you kind of expect to become an advocate for publisher sustainability, or did that kind of sense of mission, develop over time, the more experience you got?
It was interesting because I think coming from, number one, as an investor, when I looked at my portfolio, my past investments, and the ones that did the best, the mission-driven companies did better than the ones that were not mission-driven. So just number one, from a retro on what works. It's important to have a bigger mission than we show up and we make some money every day. Like that's not what we're doing. Like people will not put up with the hard times. They will not, wake up early or work late if it's just about making some money. And so mission really matters. And then when you look at the transition for us of selling off Grooveshark to the labels and tackling this for publishers, we experienced something at Grooveshark. So Grooveshark was a media publisher, right? They were a website. They were ad supported, subscription supported. And we noticed something towards the end where something was kind of chipping away at our revenue. And as we dug into it, we started to realize what was going on with the explosion of ad blockers. And for us, I guess there were a couple ways people were going at it. One was treating it like there's a big battle afoot. And so publishers and visitors are in a fight with each other. And there were some folks trying to solve it that way. And we kind of just went a different direction, which was this idea of, like, there has to be a relationship between those two. Like, if there is going to be a sustainable model into the future, then there has to be a relationship. So it's not a fight about who can like arm wrestle the other one into submission. It is like, how do we together create a sustainable system into the future? And so anyway, I think that was key to what ultimately became our mission, which is saving the free internet one publisher at a time. And it was this idea that this technology empowerment challenges the publisher business model in a mix of ways. Adblock was just tip of the iceberg, but whether it's Adblock or GDPR, CCPA, privacy consent, killing off third-party signals, browsers killing off third-party signals, and now AI getting in the middle, the world of kind of hiding behind your website and just shooting ads at people, tracking people and shooting ads, was giving way to, you have to stick your hand out and start a direct relationship with the visitor or you're not going to be here tomorrow. And so that's a shift of the entire internet model, right? The core funding model for news websites and media websites was track people and shoot ads. But because of this technology empowerment and loss of signal, how do you talk to people? How do you stick your hand out and say hello? And it was surprising for us that even though the category has billions of dollars of ad tech companies, there wasn't really a marketing automation company. Like this stuff about how do you talk to someone? How do you build a relationship? How do you create some sustainable system into the future? Like that's more marketing than it is ad tech. And yet there was no HubSpot for media publishers. There was no Salesforce for media publishers. And so we went to go build that.
Dan, I'm going to ask a question, and I know it's nighttime over in Florida. We've lost your lighting. What's happened? Have we lost the lights? Is that what's happened over there on your side?
Yeah, let's see.
Is it? I think we can still see
dark here. 1 second. Let me see if I can.
All right. That's all right. Well, Paul and I, in the meantime, will entertain ourselves with a bit of music from Napster.
Yeah, that's better.
That's better. Yes. Yeah. That's all right. Look, I just want to quickly duck into, we've been talking about ad blocking, and for those who aren't familiar with ad blocking, do you want to just quickly give us a snapshot on what that is and how important it is? And I'm a firm believer that democracy rides on making sure that we don't have ad blockers on people's computers.
So I'll start with just the idea that it's blockers. In the earliest days, it was ad blockers because that was kind of the first step. But that whole concept has morphed into blockers generally, privacy blockers, network blockers. Sometimes you hear it called dark traffic or militant blockers. It's all this soup of technologies that are blocking network calls and or hiding elements on web pages so that ads don't show. And even it's interesting, even in most of the cases where there's some sort of a privacy claim, the surveys and research we've done is that typically the primary goal is actually to avoid the ads, even though the privacy words are put on it. In most cases, people are just trying to get away from ads because there was a breakdown of the deal in some sense, right? Mm-hmm. Between publishers and visitors, to where publishers started stacking in maybe more ads than they should, or more intrusive ads than they should, and so that whole relationship breaks down, and so users start to get blockers. They don't care if a publisher lives or dies. So again, the relationship starts to break down, and that's why we come back around a relationship. Like you have to go right at the core problem, and it was that there was just no relationship between the two parties. So yeah, these blockers, they block so that ads don't show. And for most media publishers that were traditionally just tracking people so they could show ads, all of a sudden 5%, 10%, 20%. In gaming categories, we've had publishers with over 50% block rates on their sites. And so it's just eating away at revenue.
I think the
content.
Yeah, I think the technology side is quite simple for people to use AdBlock. It's an extension that you can download if you're using Chrome from the Google Store and Apple from the Apple Store that you install into the browser. Yep. It intercepts the ad feed, and for those who might not be familiar, the feed from the content and the ads are delivered in two separate streams and then compiled into the browser. That AdBlock extension is able to intercept the ad feed and block that feed so that you don't see ads on the computer. But that's a significant problem when we talk about publishers investing in journalism and journalism giving people access to democratic values to protect democracy. And I think when we talk about advertiser and subscriber models for paying for journalism, we need to protect that. And as much as we don't want to see the ads, I think publishers also have got a problem as well. And as you said, with the amount of ads that they're putting on the pages, because the costs keep going up to run businesses these days. The old story of telling a great ad, and we all remember the jingles from the 70s and 80s and before, we don't see a lot of that anymore, and I'm really keen to see how publishers can reinvent that, the narrative where we open up Vogue magazine and we see the first 10 pages taken out by the LVMH group or Chanel, and they're beautiful. They're a construct where they tell the story, but they're an advertising solution, but we don't see that online. And I'm really keen to see how we can, move back into that territory again. But I think, there's obviously outside of what Admiral's doing. Admiral describes itself as a visitor relationship management platform, as you were saying. And for somebody hearing that term for the first time, can you tell us what that actually means in practice and why it matters?
Sure. So as I mentioned before, there wasn't really a marketing automation platform for media pubs yet. And so as we started to launch ours, what we realized was there are CRM systems that have been around for decades, right? Salesforce, others, customer relationship management systems. But that first anonymous visitor who shows up on a website, they're not really a customer yet. They're just a visitor. And so what we realized was that kind of a lot of the CRMs and marketing automations that were built for e-commerce websites or B2B websites were just not built right for media publishers, which starts with that first anonymous visitor. And so that's what we built, this VRM system, which is how could we help move that relationship from really zero relationship of that first anonymous visit, hopefully all the way up to maximum relationship, right? Again, where the two parties really care about each other, and the visitor loves the stuff that publisher creates, and the publisher loves and appreciates that visitor shows up. And it's a journey, to be honest with you, right? It's not just one thing. It's not just turn off your ad blocker and all of a sudden there's a super strong relationship. It is everything along that path, right? Turning off your blocker is one step in a relationship. Sharing an email address is another step in a relationship. Maybe donating, maybe subscribing, making your privacy consent choices, sharing first-party data, all of those things, or adopting your mobile app or following on social. They're all pieces of what it means to have a relationship. And so we built a VRM platform to do all of those things. It really starts with one tag. We say, listen, publisher, you're just losing money left and right. There's kind of a leaky bucket, whether it's ad block losses or exit losses or consent losses. Put this free tag on your page and we'll just show you what's going on. That, to be honest, you're not seeing in your analytics because blockers actually break the analytics calls. And so publishers put it on and then they see, oh my gosh, I'm losing $100,000 or $1 million. And they ask, Admiral, can you help solve some of this? And we say, we sure can. And as a matter of fact, since that tag is already live on page, we can launch all of these capabilities with the flick of switches. There's no coding required. We can turn on ad block recovery. We can turn on email capture. We can turn on a fully functional top to bottom paywall, including credit card processing. We can turn on privacy consent. We can turn on extend, which extends visitor journeys longer for more page view consumption. And so that's really what the system is. That's what this VRM platform is it's one tag that sets up a no-code situation for the publisher, so they don't have to keep going back to engineering to try to negotiate for room in the engineering queue, but rather they can just launch better journeys for their visitors. And in the process, what we realized was that some publishers already did have a VRM stack if you will. But it was kind of a Frankenstein of like 6, 7 different vendors. And so that's, you've got a point solution for ad block and a point solution paywall and a point solution privacy consent and a point solution email capture. And it's just a mess. Like it is 7 vendors to manage. It is 7 tags on page. It's really 7 different decision engines firing on every page view, trying to figure out, and is now when I'm supposed to talk to the visitor? And so they'll step on top of each other. And so the whole visitor journey gets messed up. And so we said, listen, number one, we can fit into whatever you currently have. You don't have to use everything in our suite, but eventually you should shed tags and you should work towards a single visitor journey system that helps you coordinate this for maximum outcomes, but also just the best experience for the visitor.
Well, I just want to ask one more question. Dan, you've talked about analytics, blocking. So these ad block extensions that people can download, from a publisher's perspective, they are aware that to unblock these extensions people are using, a pop-up banner needs to be displayed on the user's screen when they arrive on the publisher's site. And you'll see more often Admiral down the bottom corner advising the user that is a banner with instructions on how to turn off the adblock extension. Now, publishers don't like that because it interferes with user experience. However, the pitch here is for publishers that, one, they're losing ad revenue because they've got the extension already, users have the extension turned on, and two, those ad block extensions are often blocking analytics tools as well. So those users are not popping up on or appearing in their analytics report. So they're almost like a dark user that's consuming resources from from delivery of content through the CMS and hosting, etc. So there really is no value for those users from the publisher's perspective at all, commercially, or from visitors in their analytics reports. Am I right in that term statement?
Yeah, I think there's the strategic aspect of this and there's the tactical aspect.
Yeah.
I tend to start at the strategic, which is the world of hiding behind your website and not talking to visitors and actively trying to not start a relationship with your visitor is gone. And so it just starts with like that initial hesitance to actually talk to a visitor is like just the backwards way to think about the world we're in now. You have to build relationships with your visitors. So that's just at the strategic level. Like entire organizations need to realize we're in a different game now. We're not in a game to where you just hide and shoot ads. Like we're in a game of how are we going to wrap our arms around our visitors? And then tactically, to your point, you need really intelligent ways to talk to visitors at the right time, very segmented, A/B tested, etc., to ask people to support content that they love. And if you do it in an intelligent way, they will do it in large numbers. And again, it's back to this kind of mutual respect for each other, right? If you speak in their terms and you do it in intelligent ways with, again, sophisticated journey systems, then they'll reciprocate. And when they do, it unlocks your full ad stack, full data stack, full analytics stack. This isn't like trying to trick the blockers and like sneak some ads past the blocker. This is a consent-based approach, right? When that blocker is taken off, that user has decided, I care enough about this publisher, I care enough about this content to allow a value exchange. And therefore advertisers should love that. This is a consent-based approach. It's not like somebody snuck an ad through. Again, if you do it right, and by the way, what happens is it does open the conversation, right? If you have been just hiding and never talking to your visitors, this opens the conversation. And one of the things that happens, and this is what actually led from just our first MVP focus on ad block into the broader visitor relationship management that you know now, is there's a lot of value exchanges that could happen here, right? It's not just a black or white turn off your blocker. It could be please allow list or subscribe, or please allow list or join our newsletter, or so you can set up very sophisticated ways to have a nuanced conversation with people, but it opens the door to further conversations, right? To the degree that someone has joined a newsletter, well, then maybe later you could help them understand, hey, I've got a newsletter focused on the rugby team that you love, right? But if you don't start talking to people, you're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting, like especially the evolution in that space in particular over the years. I mean, I know when we trialed, as the kind of guy in the middle here, as an independent consultant, like my feedback and recommendations to publishers is pretty direct on this stuff. Like, users with ad blockers have no value to your business, like just straight up. Like I'm pretty strongly opinion about that. Like, and you're right. Like it's not about like necessarily forcing hard choices. It's about opening up that dialogue with the visitor. I know when we trialed Admiral originally back in 2020 or 2021, whenever it was, like we saw a pretty strong recovery rate when we took that approach of around, I think, close to 90% recovery rate of the people that had ad blockers installed. So I think you're right in saying that when you open that dialogue, people are more often than not open to engaging in that. And also having that clear value exchange is important as well. I've in the last few months kind of working as a consultant, working with publishers out there, I'm seeing in a lot of the data and a lot of the impacts that publishers are experiencing right now, particularly independent, smaller publishers where, you're seeing, 70-80% of traffic losses in the last 2 years. They're now at a position where their commercial strategies need to evolve and need to adapt to the current marketplace and where we're heading, right? And when you've lost 80% of your traffic, you're not really able to play those scale games anymore. You've really got to focus on how do we kind of create the most value out of the lowest ceiling that we've got. And I think, the visitor relationships approach that Admiral has advocated for a long time, I think it's worked out quite well in that it's something that, full transparency to the audience. I got to do some work for Admiral for a little bit last year, so I've seen how the sausage gets made over there too. And I know it's a mission that everybody in the company really believes in helping the publishing industry. And as I said, it's something that you guys have advocated for a long time, long before AI disruption kind of hit the marketplace, as we've seen in the recent years. So it's kind of gone from being something that you guys advocated for a long time to now being mission critical for publishers, in my opinion. What was it about kind of the publishing industry pre-2022 that, had you guys really thinking like, this is the long-term strategy that the industry needs to focus on?
So it's interesting. We tracked it in the early days, even just the word relationship at industry conferences and panel titles, etc. The word relationship was not used 5 years ago. It was other things. It was yield. It was subscriber rates. It was how big is my email list. It was these kind of silo concepts versus the overarching idea that we need a better relationship with our visitors. But luckily now in the last 5 years or so, particularly last couple years, it's come racing forward. We've been a beneficiary of this. It's come racing forward. You can't go to a publisher event now without some discussion of the visitor relationship, particularly now with AI kind of stepping in the middle of that relationship, right? And so AI, the LLMs are trying to take that visitor relationship and the publisher loses it. And so anyway, I think, we were lucky that directionally we were right. We were pretty good direction. But then I think AI just put an amplifier on all of it to move everyone in this direction. But again, AI was just one of the fire drills. Again, ad block was one of the fire drills, and loss of signal and loss of cookies was another fire drill. But they were all the same overarching problem, which is you're losing the ability to just do this in anonymous ways. You have to reach out. And so anyway, we've been beneficiaries of it, but we're also just trying to help as many publishers as possible. I will say that initial reluctance to not talk to your visitors is has been baked in for a decade. And when we first came into the category, it struck me as on the venture side, if I would back a SaaS company, for example, I could remember being at the board meeting and the marketing guy comes in and he talks about how many visitors came to the website, et cetera, last quarter. And if he had said, we had, 20 million visitors to my website, which, by the way, SaaS companies never get that many visitors to their websites. But if he had said, we got 20 million visitors, the board would have been crazy excited. They would have said, that's fantastic. So, what did we get from that? Did we get, some emails or some leads or something? And the general kind of media approach was, well, no. We're just hoping they show up next month. There was no concept of how am I going to build a closer relationship with that person? And anyway, I think tough times kind of lead people to kind of best practices. And the best practices in other industries are, if someone shows up, find a way to start a relationship with them. And luckily, media pubs are moving very quickly on this front.
It's an interesting area, I think, and going back to what Paul was talking about, the scale of ads that are being blocked on publisher sites, it's significant. And I think once publishers realize how many people are using ad blockers, the story or the narrative quickly changes, opening up not just opportunities for to directly re-commercialize those ad impressions, but to push those ads out through other supply channels for increasing programmatic opportunities as well. And I think there's, publishers do get concerned around sell-through rates dropping when they start seeing more ads coming through. But I think the wise investor and publisher strategy would look at that and think, well, if I've got more ads to sell because I've released more ads into the network through blocking these users, open up experimentation through A/B testing, see an increase in programmatic supply opportunities, and the business tends to grow strategically in new directions that it had been locked down to before. But look, I'm all for. I just love this relationship thing. So I want to go back onto this because, sorry, this has just caught my attention. You've got your success. Sorry, your customer success team. They're called the Customer Love Team.
Yeah.
led by the Love Doctor. Where's that come from? And has that? What is that? And what's the differentiator there?
Yeah. So we get a lot of comments on that from our. Yeah. You usually can't talk to one of our customers without customer love coming up at some point, and it's one of those kind of self-fulfilling prophecies. I think that in the early days we established our customer success as customer love, and there were some giggles at the time of what is this customer love thing, and I joke about the Love Doctor Brian. He's incredible. He leads our customer love team, and it just reinforces not just for that team, but for the entire company, how central customer love is to who we are, right? We didn't pay some consultants to tell us what our value system is, right? It kind of grew up from the bottom of our value system is caring that our customer succeeds. We ended up actually a few years ago did a really cool, we do these kind of book clubs within the company, and we'll do a book club and talk about the chapters and everything. And there was a book called Winning on Purpose, which I would recommend to anyone, written by the guy who invented Net Promoter Score. And so he had been doing Net Promoter Score for multiple decades. And he noticed that something else was going on, that companies with similar Net Promoter Scores might perform differently. And what he stumbled onto was this idea that the companies who align themselves with making sure the customer wins end up better off than the companies that do not. And they gave examples of, maybe an air condition repair company, but when they show up, the customer has a flat tire and he helps them change the tire, right? That doesn't sell an additional air conditioner, but it's this idea that like you just care about the customer having a great day and succeeding. And so our pricing model and everything is just aligned for publisher success. Like we're only happy if the publisher succeeds. And what was interesting about that book is he ended up using the words customer love in the book, and we were all fired up because we were already the customer love team. But anyway, it's been a real differentiator for us when we have gone through our funding round. So we closed seed funding, and then we closed our growth round of fundings. It was one of the topics that came up whenever the investors would do due diligence calls about what makes Admiral special. Customer love was something that came up every time.
I'm absolutely going to put myself on the record here, and I can say hands down that I have not worked with a vendor that has expressed so much empathy and eagerness to strive to support and lean into working with businesses. Look, we obviously do. I'm not saying that the other people aren't or other vendors aren't, but you guys are just definitely a standout as a model. So yeah, well done to that. I think that's definitely
One testimonial, just to add anecdote, if you will, is the global head of sales at Admiral, Trevor Abbott, became one of my closest friends and basically adopted brother. So if that's not a testament to customer love, I don't know what is.
And by the way, Paul, I love you. I think you're a great mate. We've got a good business happening here.
Nice.
Professionally speaking, of course. That's good.
I guess kind of we've been talking about, I think the relationships aspect, to your earlier point around being on a spectrum, right? And I think that's it's a good way of looking at it in terms of not every visitor on your website is in the same place in that spectrum, in that journey. You're going to have people that are coming from, if you try to segment your visitors based on their relationship score or their loyalty to the brand or something like that, there's a wide range of that. You've got people that are coming and viewing one page and then bouncing. You've got people that are coming frequently all the time, and segmenting those users based on that, and kind of having a personalized and unique strategy, and using platforms like Admiral to do that. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the ad blocker audience from the trials that I remember was also kind of one of the highest engagement audiences as well. Is that right?
Yeah. I was going to mention that earlier around. I think our numbers right now is that the page views per visitor of the recovered blockers is 4 times that of the average allowed visitor who wasn't using a blocker. And so it's the most active. It's the digital natives. It's a very valuable segment. Going back to kind of the advertising opportunity as well, and figuring out how to set up your stack for best outcomes. This is a really valuable group. We've had advertisers, some of the biggest agencies in the world, come to us because they want to get to this group, right? Like BMW as an example, they're trying to get to this, call it 25 to 34-year-old male demographic with the new car that's coming out. And they can buy scale, but what they can't pick up is reach to these people. These people are using a blocker. So it doesn't matter what website they advertise on, they can't get to them unless it's a website that has recovered those visitors to be able to get to them. So it's a very valuable set that publishers, again, because their analytics are broken, et cetera, number one, they don't even realize the traffic is there. But then number two, it's some of their most valuable traffic that they're letting just fly under the radar.
And I guess to kind of follow on from that, I'll dig into it a little more. So one of the things Admiral talks about is growing revenue by increasing monetizable inventory rather than just chasing traffic. I guess what does that look like in practice, and how do things like your recently launched exit recovery and consent recovery kind of feed into that?
Yeah. So I'm glad you mentioned that because sitting at the top of the company, I speak in platitude. I talk about relationships all the time, et cetera. But I think a lot of people, like, when it gets down to brass tacks, what do you really mean when you say relationships? Like, what is that? There's a lot of components to what it means to have a relationship. And one of the most valuable ones is really just page view consumption. Like we use, the publishers use engagement, right? And other terms. It's page views and page views per visitor, which ultimately leads to ARPU. And so what we do across many of our modules is we just unlock new monetizable page views for publishers. If you think about it, a given website, I think I mentioned this earlier, it's almost like this leaky bucket of revenue just seeping away, whether it is blocked revenue, blocked losses, it is consent losses because you haven't optimized or done consent recovery to pick up consent, or it's exit recovery. Exit recovery is one that I absolutely blows my mind. When you the scale of ad block is already a multi-billion-dollar problem, but exits dwarf that. Every single day, every one of your visitors exits your website. And so when you think of a sheer scale of opportunity for a publisher, it is massive. But I don't think publishers think of it as like lost opportunity, right? Exit losses, exit recovery. And so that's one of the things we're trying to help kind of bring to the fore is this idea of like, no. Those are losses, right? Like in other businesses, when someone leaves, there's a loss there, and they do things to try to avoid that loss. And so in this instance, exit recovery is massive. We actually had one of our customers, CBS, using what's called our convert module to do something fairly innovative. The convert module is fairly open-ended. You can use it to kind of get people to whatever pages you want or what have you. And they were using it because they realized their football content monetized at much higher rates than some of their other content. It was a lot of video and video ads. And so they said, hey, can we use your journey system to get people over to our football content? And it was highly successful. A really innovative team over there took our platform and like ran with it in that direction. And so what we did was we ended up productizing that. And we have this new extend module that when someone is about to leave, there is an opportunity to show them something breaking news or a highlight or what is popular or what is surging right now. And everyone's not going to accept it, and that's totally fine. But some of them are. And that is going to be new page views, new revenue, and again, just stronger relationship. The more someone consumes with your website, they're going to care more and more about you into the future.
Dan, I'm just conscious of time. We are definitely going. You've not even covered half the products that Paul and I really wanted to get into today. Can we bring you back on for another go?
I would love that.
Because you've got a whole world of you're commercializing bots, which is coming out, and I'm just fascinating. Yes. So I've just a couple of quick questions before we do wrap up, though. What does the future look like for Admiral? What's the most exciting thing that you've got coming up on your roadmap?
So, as in recently launched, that extend module, huge opportunity for publishers. The consent recovery module, most of the consent players out there are very much compliance minded, whereas we are revenue minded. But we get you the compliance, but we also pick up on your consent recovery as well, and so it's a new opportunity for publishers. So those are good. But then also, as you almost alluded to there with the AI, our visitor copilot is a massive launch. We actually just launched it. Our kind of coming out party is with Rob Beeler at Beeler Tech, building really the AdOps, RevOps audience expert to pull together all of the Beeler intel plus other intel that anyone can engage with in a conversational way. That's an example of a visitor copilot on Beeler Tech, but we now make that possible for any of the publishers that have our tag on page. They can flick a switch and all of a sudden all of their content becomes conversational and folks can explore it, which publishers have to do. It's not going to be sufficient to just try to like block the LLM, block the scrapers, but then stay in an article paradigm. Users are getting trained to have conversations and go deeper on articles and content. And so they're going to want to do that on publisher websites. So anyway, we're very excited about that. That's kind of the playing offense on AI. And then there's a playing defense aspect on the detection, access control and value exchange with bots. The same stuff we did for ad blockers, which were an example of a visitor without value exchange. We're offering the same capability for the bots, which again is an offense-defense opportunity for publishers.
I find that absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. Super.
I guess, we like to do a little bit of a crystal ball segment sometimes here, and I think you'd be a great person to ask this question. So, crystal ball time, if we fast forward 5 years, what will separate the publishers who thrive from those who struggle?
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it is the publishers who build direct relationships with their visitors. I won't say names, but we all know the sites that seem to be building relationships with their visitors and the sites that don't. The sites that don't, they're just going to fall by the wayside in the next 5 years. The internet is going to be defined by the ones that build relationships. And by the way, the LLMs, in buying content, they're going to be buying content from the most trusted providers of content. They're going to pay the most for the most trusted providers. And one measure of that trust is going to be how many relationships do they have with their visitors? How loyal are their visitors? That's all going to accrue to what's the trust factor of that publisher's content, which is then going to play into how much LMs would pay for it. So anyway, I think it's already happening. There's a separation going on of the publishers that see the opportunity, and they are not hiding behind their website. They are wrapping their arms around their visitors. That's going to define winners and losers over the next 5 years. Yeah.
I think just one last question as well. I want to kind of touch on the personal. You've been leading Admiral for over a decade now, and obviously a long storied history throughout various media and technology sectors. Being the Admiral of Admiral, if you will, leading the business, what does it mean to you personally to guide the team and the business through a time of such rapid change in the industry?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of aspects here. One is the mission. The mission is just dead on, and so like why I wake up every morning, the excitement I wake up with every morning, the excitement that I share with my family about what I did each day, it just gets me fired up. The mission is saving the free internet one publisher at a time, but and David and I had a bit of an email exchange about this. It's the impact the internet has on society overall and democracy and free choice. It's like it is paramount. And so to be a part of helping create that sustainability into the future is just, it really gets me fired up every day. And then the second aspect would be just the people aspect, the relationships that we have built both within our team, but then the relationships we have with our public, with you guys. When we all go to our deathbed, it's not going to matter how much money we made or what have you. It's going to be like, how did we touch people in life, and it's been really rewarding so far.
Luckett, another business leader at the top of the game who is about people. I cannot begin to tell you, this is amazing. And Dan, we're just so excited to hear you say that. Not that we were leading you into that, but it's definitely an evolution that we are so grateful to see in the media industry, specifically to see that people are first. Product is obviously as important, but you have to look after the people. The brain drain is just too hard to manage otherwise. Thank you. That's refreshing.
This has been a lot of fun. Yeah, I would love to come back again. There's so much more we could talk about, but we hit some big topics.
No, let's not go down to Gators. Yeah. I'm still trying to work out if they're basketball or football. Sorry.
All of it.
Oh, God, help me. Yeah. So I won't talk about heated rivalry then.
Yeah. No, okay. Dan, CEO of Admiral, the Visitor Relationship Management Company. Thanks for joining the show today. It's been an honor having you on. You were at the top of my list of people I wanted to bring on when we started this show. So I'm very, very glad to be, and I was very excited for today's episode.
Thank you.
For everyone watching us, listening to us, we look forward to you joining us next time here on Media Tech Talk.
Hi guys, I'm Chris Manson, Country Director for Australia and New Zealand at Ogre since 2020. Now, after 20 years of experience in media sales, commercial strategy, advertising leadership. I now lead Ogree's growth across Australia and New Zealand. We help brands drive measurable outcomes and publishers monetize more effectively through persona intelligence, where we're delivering persona performance at scale while protecting user privacy. Now, with 64% of marketers now saying that signal loss is already impacting campaign performance, the way we plan, the way we activate, the way we monetize media is obviously fundamentally changing. So here's the question then: if advertising signals that have powered the last decade, if they are disappearing, what exactly is signal loss? How do we fix it? And then probably most importantly, what replaces it? So join me on the conversation that's inspiring media minds. That's next on Media Tech Talk.